All right, so now we are live. So, but it's not showing up as live on YouTube. Let me refresh it. Let's see. Is it live there? It says we are now live. Let's see. Yeah, we are now live. Is it live there? Let me close that window. There's a delay. But we are live. Okay. Do you guys have any questions before we get started? We still got about 6 or 5 minutes.
No, looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Okay, so if anyone out there is watching, we're just going to wait a few minutes for some more folk to show up. I'm Calvin James, author of The Colored Water Fountain. In the middle there is Jordan Pizzuti. She's the illustrator. At the end is my marketing advisor, Beth Werner. Like if anyone ever needs any help with illustration or marketing, I would definitely recommend these two women. And they've been great help to me getting this first book done. Couldn't have done it without them. So we got about 5 minutes till we start.
Do we get to meet Mrs. Calvin? I thought she might be on.
Or
is she busy keeping Asher occupied, so you're doing this?
Hold on. Let me see. Let me see if she'll come up. She reminds me of someone I talked to Friday morning who didn't want to be on camera. I won't mention any names.
Listen, we're not even going to go there. What did I put you through yesterday?
No, I got to see a fireplace. Hold on. I'm just going to call her. Let's see. Phone.
I mean, don't bother her. I just would be happy to say hi, but it doesn't have to be tonight if she's busy.
Why would she do that? I'm going to send her a text. Can you come up for 1 second? Okay, I'll see if she'll come upstairs. And I'll bring on Asher before the end. So at the end, after all the questions are done, I'm going to read a short excerpt from The Colored Water Fountain. And I think a good idea before that happens is I should actually go get a copy of the book because I don't have it with me. So I'll be right back.
For sure. So have you worked on a bunch of other books since this one, Jordan?
No, I'm in my senior year of college, so this was my first big project, and I'm hoping to do more, but have like one book idea of my own, but that's nowhere even near in the works, realistically, so we'll see when we get there.
It takes time to kick things around before it goes into execution.
Yeah.
Calvin is just remarkable what he is able to produce. He turns thought into action like hardly anyone I've ever seen. Really incredible.
Oh my.
Yeah, because it was better in the corner without stuff in the back. Okay, so Miss Wavy James is here.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So much about you ladies. Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
How you guys doing?
Sorry if we were interrupting. I just wanted to say
no,
hello.
You're fine. I'm just saying a quick hi. Bye.
All right, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So I didn't hear what you said to Beth, Jordan. Have you worked on any of the books since this one?
No, I was saying that this was like the first really big project that I've worked on, and hoping to do more and continue working with you in the future. But like I said, I'm still in classes, still doing all of that stuff, and I have like one book that I would like to work on for myself, but we haven't gotten there yet. So
Chris is here, so I'm going to add him so you guys can finally meet him.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you? Nice to meet
Good. You too.
So I've been working with Chris since I've been about 19. He has some of the most memorable quotes that anyone ever told me in my life.
You'll have to remind me.
Oh, no, I have a catalog. I've got a catalog. So it is 1 minute to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So, hi, I'm Calvin James, author of The Colored Water Fountain. I want to thank everyone and anyone who's out there watching. Greatly appreciate all your support. For independent artists, it's really tough to get products out there and push them. So if you know other independent artists out there, always try to support them. It's so great that you guys have come out and purchased the book, and I've been having a lot of fun doing this. So in the corner, I guess, well, to my right, it might be to your left, is Jordan Pizzuti. She's the author of The Colored Water Fountain. We have Chris Hansen on the bottom left. He's a songwriter and music producer I've been working with for over 20 years. And down in the bottom right is Beth Werner. She's a marketing advisor and editor. She's been with me since I started Calvin James Curates and started getting this business off the ground to publish my 9 children's books, the first one being, of course, Colored Water Fountain. So I'm going to start off with Jordan. I'm going to minimize the screen. Well, I don't know if I can minimize the screen. I'll just leave it like this. Anyway, I'm going to start off with Jordan. So Jordan, I've got some questions for you. Okay. So when did you, wait a minute, what are you doing, Jordan? Here we go. Yeah. How old were you when you decided that you really thought that illustration was what you wanted to do?
Well, I've always been interested in art. I think I started taking art generally kind of seriously around middle school, really getting into like looking at artists that I loved and buying the supplies and, just kind of like doodling and whatnot. But in high school, I thought I was going to go into like fine arts. I did a lot of painting and realistic drawing and stuff. And then it wasn't probably till like only 2 years ago that I started taking like illustration as a concept seriously and really learning what that meant and going into the field.
Okay. And what was the most challenging aspect for you for us working on the Colored Water Fountain?
I think the most challenging aspect is just creating such a large project in general. Doing an entire book and planning, almost 40 images across the board is hard to do, especially just trying to make sure that everything is consistent, that the pages flow, that the ideas are coming through. It's just like, I hadn't worked on such like a large scale thing before. I'd taken like a book class where it was like, we kind of got a book to like a halfway point, but I'd never gotten a book to like the finished point, which is a lot of work and just a lot of planning and execution. So
yeah. And out of the 8 children's books that we've got left, I know it's probably been a while since you've gone through all of them, but if you can remember, which one are you most excited about doing next?
I like the idea of River just because I'm really into character design lately and sort of anthropomorphizing like a river and turning that into a character is really interesting, and I'd really love to go through that process. I'm also interested in the one that we'll hopefully be working on soon. I'm allowed to say Christmas Sunrise. I think is going to be really cute. I'm super excited about that one. I like the story a lot. I like the amount of freedom that it gives the images and creating all those sorts of scenes.
Gotcha. Cool. And what would your advice be to other people who might want to get into illustration?
Honestly, maybe just try a little bit of everything, because like in all of the classes that I've taken, we've done editorial illustration, children's illustration, pattern design, all sorts of things, and sort of just finding what you really like and what makes you happy and what other people will receive well from you is a big challenge. Like, it was one of the hardest things for me to be like, okay, I'm not doing fine art, I'm doing illustration. So like, what does that mean? Like, where am I going to go? So just kind of trying everything out, I think, is a good idea.
Okay. And what would you say is something that you learned, like the biggest lesson you've learned from this first book you did with me, The Colored Water Fountain?
I've just learned a lot about the process in general because it's not really something you can like read up on it. You can read the steps, but it's nothing like actually going through it and making it all happen is it's a lot of work. It's rewarding. But it's just so nice to actually be able to get through all of that and learn. And, now I feel much more prepared for the next time, which is awesome. But just having that physical copy in your hands at the end is so rewarding and awesome. And like seeing it like on my mom's bookshelf is so cool. Yeah.
All right. So what are your 5 questions you've got for me?
For you, I have got what or who was your biggest inspiration for the colored water fountain?
It was definitely Asher and the combination of Trump being elected. I remember like the days and weeks that followed, like it was like the first time that I can remember that, like I didn't quite feel safe as I did before he was elected as a black man in America. And my son was 2 years old, and being a black man, having a son, I'm thinking to myself, I have to prepare him for a world that's going to be a little bit different from what I thought of when I grew up. I'm like, well, how am I going to teach him these things, and how can I teach them early? And I got the idea of the colored water fountain. But so many stories have been told about that in a realistic way. I'm like, well, how can I tell it differently? Where to tell it from a different perspective. So if you tell a story from a different perspective, you'll open some people's eyes who might have never looked at it that way. And recently I had an 80-year-old patient at my physical therapy clinic who came in, and I looked over and she was on the exercise bike reading it. And she came over to me. She's like, "This is one of the best books I've ever read. Like everybody my age needs to read this book." And I was just so happy she told me that. So Asher and the social unrest and racial issues we've had in the past 4 or 5 years, what kind of spurred the inspiration for this book.
Awesome. And I want to ask who your favorite children's book authors are, who you take inspiration from.
There are probably only 3 books. The funny thing is I really don't like reading. I listen to a lot of books on tape. But definitely the 3 books that I'd say have influenced me the most is The Giving Tree, The Silmarillions by J.R.R. Tolkien, and The Lorax. And if anyone's ever read those 3 books, and over the years they read my books, they'll see like the influence of those stories. How like Colored Water Fountain has a lot of lore in it. Like I give it a deep backstory where the story comes from. There's a social lesson to it, and how like in the Lorax, like he creates a different world to say how destroying the environment is not a good thing, and how we need to build a better relationship with nature. So those 3 books, and the Giving Tree is just like that book is just like heartbreaking, and then like I can read that 100 times in a row and it still hits me. So I wanted to write stories like that have like a powerful message, and that not only kids enjoy reading, but adults enjoy reading too.
Awesome. What's the most rewarding part of this project now that it's sort of wrapping up?
Having it done.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I remember like we kept, going back and forth. I'm like, oh, like this word is misspelled. Like we forgot this, we forgot that. Like, and the same thing on my end. Now that we've been through this, now I figured out like, okay, you can just do the images. The next book, I'll just do all the editing, and then Beth will look it over and we'll be done. Like you said, just the process of going through this remind me a lot of my first album where, Chris and I had recorded for like 6 months, and there was a power outage, and we lost 6 months of work, whole album gone. I had to do the whole thing over. So just getting it done, was very, very rewarding. Like, this is finished. We can move on.
Yeah. What was the hardest part of bringing this story to life?
The planning. So when I was, in my early 20s working with Chris, and I started Climax Records Incorporated, I was very naive. I felt like just working hard and being a good person would be enough, and that's totally not enough. You got to have luck. You got to have good planning. You got to have good people around you. And so the toughest part was planning it out. So I started planning this like in 2016, because I started writing these stories a long time ago. And I just made a point that I was not going to make those same mistakes and not really have a plan for not even next year, but like now I have a plan, you see, for 10 years out to make sure this gets done. And so that was the hardest part, because I'm very impulsive and I'm very impatient and I want to get stuff done. So I took those lessons from Climax Records and said, all right, I'm not going to make those mistakes. I'm going to slow myself down. I'm going to make a solid plan. I'm going to get people around me that are going to help me complete this plan.
Yeah. And then my last question for you was, what was something that you learned working with me as well?
Trusting you. Because every time, you're a creative person, and I know this goes to Chris and you as well, you have a vision in your head of how you want something to be or look. And I remember probably our biggest disagreement was the cover and the letters, because I wanted to be white or something like clear, and you wanted to be green. And I really respected the fact that you kind of put your foot down and said, I really feel strongly about this. Like, these letters should be this color. And I was like, all right. So let me take a look at it again. And you were right. Like, in the end, it was like, okay, she's absolutely right. And so just kind of like giving you your space when you're working, like, yes, I'm writing it, but you're part of the process, and just trusting that, okay, Jordan knows what she's doing. If she tells me something's going to work, I got to trust her. And so that was the biggest thing I learned.
Awesome.
All right. So if anybody have any questions for Jordan about like illustration or anything like that? If not, we're going to move on to my buddy Chris. So Chris Hansen is a music producer and songwriter. He's been doing it for over 20 years. He's been with a band called Matt Pond PA and working with them for years. One of my best buds in the world. Probably one of the best things everyone said about Chris is that he's in the race competing with Santa Claus for goodness. And that kind of sums up.
Who said that?
Matt Pond said that. He said that. Kind of summed up Chris, but he's one of the best buds in the world and has helped me out a ton, and wouldn't be where I am today without him. So here are your questions, Chris. When did you realize that music's what you wanted to do?
It kind of just happened. I got into music really young. I like movie music. I didn't get into pop music till I was a little older, maybe 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. I didn't start playing guitar till 12, I don't think, but it was just something we did. My brother and I did for fun, and then it just became what I kept doing.
Gotcha. And over the past 20 years that you've been doing it, more than that, like 20 plus years, have you ever had moments of like, all right, I got to do something else, this isn't paying the bills, or any doubts like that?
Every day? It's I'm trying to like avoid the cliches, like it's a tough biz, man. But there's lots of obstacles, and it's a creative world, and it's a business, and they're always at odds, and you're trying to make ends meet in many different ways. And it's in some ways I'm doing multiple jobs. I'm a musician, I'm an audio engineer, I'm a producer. So it's, you have to have a lot of plates spinning to make it viable. So yeah, and you never know what's going to happen. And especially in the past 2 years, things are really upended for everyone that even thought that they had an idea of what was going on as far as their careers.
I forgot I got to plug in my computer. I got to find my plug.
Time out. How's everyone else doing today? I feel like I should scat or something till he comes back.
Fill the time.
Yeah. This is great. I've never done one of these before. So I wasn't sure how awkward I would be.
I've done several. Calvin is always super organized, very well planned. So
that's good.
That's funny, Beth. You and my wife would highly disagree on that comment you just All right. So any more on that question about like the doubts and everything?
It's constant doubt, and that's the daily battle, and it's on the business side of things, of making a living doing it, and on the creative side of things. Every time you start something new, it's a clean slate, and that's terrifying. And
right,
you question you question your creative abilities. Like, well, what am I going to come up with this time? Right. Yesterday I said I was burnt out. Now I'm getting asked to start again. You don't say no, so here I go, make it happen. So constantly. I think that's one of the biggest parts of it. is, controlling the fear and the doubt of, what am I doing? And can I keep doing this? And
Right.
is there a point to any of this?
Yeah. All right. So what was it like touring?
Oh man. This could be a whole hour. It's the highest of highs and lowest of lows. It's great and euphoric, and it's a grind. It's constant excitement and total monotony, and it's everything all at once, all the time. Um, it was great. It's a great experience. I'm sort of semi-retired from it for now because I have two young kids, so I'm not hitting the road for 3 months anytime soon. But so it's like now that it's been a little bit, I'm sort of romanticizing it. So if you asked me this question like 2 years ago, I'd have been like, it's the worst. But and then now that I had a little distance, it's great. It's beautiful, and you kind of, I'm sort of mostly a studio guy, so I spend more time making records than I do promoting them. So you kind of get isolated, and then you make a record, and it takes a long time for people to get used to it. Even though the speed of the internet age, like people still, an album you put out 2 years ago, people are just sort of getting under their fingers.
Right.
So it's like you're often touring on an album before people have even heard it a bunch and gotten used to it. So what I loved about touring was like the thing that you did 2 years ago that you thought no one liked. Now they come up and tell you like, oh, I love that album. I was like, oh, great. Like I didn't think anyone cared, and now they're asking for so there's that validating side of it. But it's, I mean, the travel aspect is great. I mean, I got to go places that I've never expected to go, and you're doing it. You're getting paid to do it, and it's wonderful. But it's also a huge grind, and you know we were in an A-list band, so we weren't in the lap of luxury. We were kind of on a B list, so it was like there's something we can make a living doing, but we have to like be really tight. So
Right.
the tour manager we hired was me because I was a good deal, and we didn't hire a bus. We drove ourselves just because it just was viable. So it could be very gritty. You could be going, driving to one of the biggest venues in LA or San Francisco, but then it's you're coming off a 8-hour drive in a van with a bunch of other people that are cranky and don't want to be there. And then you have to show up, and it's like glorious. So it's everything. It's like a microcosm. You live in a being on tour for a month is like 8 months of life experience crammed into a few weeks.
Wow.
So
Man.
that was kind of long-winded, but
What is your favorite memory of being a musician?
there's so many. So many. I remember we went to, this is going to sound sort of like self-glorifying, so I apologize, but the first time we went to Japan, it didn't, we didn't even know that our albums were out there. It was sort of like this weird thing that we got pulled into, and it was like, okay, we can go to Japan and play a few shows. And, going to a place you'd never been before, the opposite side of the world, where, in a totally surreal place that is different from where I, grew up as can be, and then seeing people that like recognize me on the street, in front of the venue, and were asking me about like, you know, oh, what was that guitar pedal you used on this song, and how you do? And I was like, you know more about me than I know. Like I don't. So it was, it sort of sounds really self-congratulatory, but it was just like memories like that where people would it's like, oh, what I'm doing makes a difference. Like we're touching people and we didn't even realize it. And
Right.
we're worried about where like which McDonald's is the best that when we pull up on the highway, and then we realize like, oh, we're contributing to society in a tiny, tiny way. So yeah, I mean, I could go on, but that was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah. And what's something you learned working with me over the past 2 decades?
I don't know, probably just to relax. I feel like I was hard on you back
Really?
then.
Hmm.
I thought so.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah. It's like the adage, like, flowers bend and blow with the wind, but when they're dead, they're brittle and stiff, and
Right.
so I don't know. I like learn to go with the flow, and it's like, just because I have a great idea doesn't mean it's the right idea or the best idea for the people I'm working with. And I guess it's probably the biggest lesson is like to not make a plan, or at least not make a firm plan. Point in a direction and just do work until something's done, but don't decide how it's going to be before you do it.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So what's your 5 questions for me?
What's the most frustrated you've ever been creatively?
Oh, definitely when we lost that 6 months of work.
I'd like to state for the record that I did have a backup hard drive, and it was when there was that major power out. Was that in 2003 or 4?
2003.
When like the whole northeast went out.
The whole northeast.
I was backing up your files, so it fried both drives. So I just didn't want anyone out there to be like, that guy should have had a backup. I was like, I did have a backup. The thing that maybe that's the biggest thing I learned from you is to have 3 backups.
Right. I mean, I remember I was living in Philly at the time, so I was driving up on the weekends to do vocals and stuff. And I remember I was coming off the Betsy Ross Bridge, and I was like, "Hey, I'm on my way up." And you said, "Don't come up." I'm like, "Wait, why not?" And you're like, "We lost everything." I was like, "Well, what do you mean everything?" Like, everything is gone. Like, the hard drives got fried. And I remember I pulled over and I cried for like an hour, like, "Why is this so hard?" But everything happened for a reason, because we did the whole album over, and it came out better, than it did. But my God, I wanted to strangle someone when that happened.
Oh yeah, and it kind of put things in perspective, like what the work is, because we obviously we made it a lot quicker the second time around,
right?
Because we kind of solved all those riddles.
But one of the riddles, you said that I wasn't singing good.
We fixed that, I think.
Well, there's this time I remember where I was doing a track. It was on Better Than Living This Life, and like you weren't feeling it. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna sing. I'm not gonna care. I'm just gonna sing. And I sang it, and you were in the booth, like you were in the closet. So I'm just looking at the back of your head, and you're just like shaking your head like this, and you stopped. And you said, "Why didn't you sing like that before?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to sing that way." And you said, "You mean good?"
See, like it refers back to, I should have gone easy.
So yeah.
Okay, what's my next question? What's your favorite song of yours that you've written?
Wow, that's tough. I would probably say Game of Life. Yeah, because I wrote that one in Philly, and this buddy of mine just did a scratch mix of it. But that was when I got to the point. I remember that song because working with you taught me to be more efficient as a writer. I would write songs that'd be like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, sometimes 6 minutes long. We had to cut those down. And I remember I got to a point where I was writing songs where people would hear it and they'd want to, like, wow, that was really good. And they want to hear it again. So I knew at that point I'd reached like the peak of my songwriting capabilities. And that one, the people who have heard that song have always told me it's the best one, because just the lyrics kind of speak to everyone. It's you try living the right way, but you've never learned that. You're so used to the fight, there's no peace without it. You're so used to the wrongs, the right way is clouded. All the streets are going one way and there's no turning back. You're forced to live the day to day. The path's so worn that it's a grave. And so yeah, that one seems to speak to just about everyone that's ever heard it. It's definitely one I want to release over the next 9 years with the rest of the stuff we're doing. So that one probably sticks out in my head. That one and Hurricane. So
that's a good one too. Well, my follow-up is tied into that. What's the hardest song you've ever written? How does that correlate with?
I'd probably say A Song for Her. And it's because it was the first song that you said was too long. So I remember I was playing it for you, and like we were jamming to it, and you were like sitting there like judging, and like, and it got to a point you're just like, no, and you just like shook your head, and you know, later on you're like, that's too long. Like you said, we got to cut like a minute out, and we had just started working together. It was probably like a couple months after I met.
So you're like, who the heck is this guy?
Right. So
what does he know?
I went home, and I was really torn about it, and I was like, you know what? First of all, this dude is helping you for free, so, and he's been doing it longer than you have. So trust him. Similar to the situation with Jordan, we were talking about earlier with the cover. It's like, you know, trust him. And we cut a minute of that song out, and to this day, I don't remember what that minute was. Like it was better for it, you know. But that was a tough decision because that was the first time that anyone ever critiqued me in a way that was like, all right, this needs to be fixed. Like this doesn't work in this way. But that one lesson taught me so much in terms of being a better writer and a better creator going forward, because I realized that, you know, what you hear in your head isn't always going to work. You know, sometimes you got to do something different.
Do you miss performing?
You know, not that much. Like you know, it got to the point, you know, when I was living in the freezer and all that crazy stuff, where I just got so burnt, and I wasn't seeing any, you know, rewards from that, and it wasn't challenging anymore. Like I didn't get nervous when I got up on stage. There was like the fire had got out of me, and maybe because I was sleeping in the freezer in the middle of winter, that kind of dimmed my fire a bit. But no, I don't miss it. I enjoy the creative process much more. I enjoy writing and figuring out that puzzle of how to make something good, more than I ever did performing. Performing was just something like I had to do to get the music out there. But I don't miss it as much as I thought I would.
Okay. My final question: when do we start the next album?
Hey, that's I am ready to go. Like, and that also brings me to probably like the two lessons that I've learned from you that I've taken with me as a creative person. Number one is do not get emotionally attached to what you write and what you create, because and going back to a song for her, if I was emotionally attached to that song, like it wouldn't have worked. We might not even work together. I'd be like, well, this is my music and I wrote it and it's mine and all that stuff. But like once you create something and you kind of like are getting it out there, it's almost like it's not yours anymore. Like it belongs to the fans and the people who hear it. And you've got to make the best version of that possible. And so that's one lesson. And the other thing I learned is right after we did City, before you went on tour with Matt Pond, you said, you know, let's do the next album. And I was like, okay, let's take the next 10 best songs. And you said one of the most profound things. You said, if those 10 songs are that good, they would have been on the first album. And I was like, you're right.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's good. I like that.
Yeah,
I was probably just procrastinating. I was probably just busy.
But like you were right. And so I went back and I wrote like 30, 40 more songs. Because you were like, yeah, if they were that good, they would have been the first 10. And so I'm ready for like 40 more songs whenever you guys are ready to record.
All right. Noted.
All right. Last but not least, Beth Werner. She is a marketing advisor, an editor. She's my good friend. She's been working with me since 2019. It's been such a pleasure.
Pleasure.
You know, could not be where I am without Beth. First question for you, Beth. Where does your love of editing come from?
I started to love reading at fairly early on, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I find even to this day, all through the years of being a reader, that there's something about the power of books to unite us, that when there's a writer that, you know, is a stranger that I've never met, many times from a completely different place and time, and yet they write a story or share information in a way that's relatable to me, that's, if it's nonfiction, that's useful to me, that teaches me something I was looking to learn, or fiction, if it's a story that could be someone from another culture, another age, another location, another era of time, and yet they write something that touches you, that makes you think differently, or maybe affirm something that you were thinking. There's a connection. There's a connection in books, like music, like any form of art. If you think of sharing a concert or going to live theater or going through a gallery exhibit, there's some element of energy that's shared between the readers, between the consumers of any form of art. And words I don't know, words just do it for me. So being a reader, a voracious reader for many years, and then when I was in school and in graduate school later on, I learned about Maxwell Perkins, who was an infamous editor, Scribner and Sons, and I just thought, that's what I want to do. That's the job I want. I want to find writers that I really believe in and see if I can help them foster their, discovery, foster them getting attached to readers.
Gotcha. Okay. And what is your favorite story of mine that I've written so far?
Well, it's interesting because Jordan and I are meeting for the first time this evening, even though we've been aware of each other. And when you asked her earlier and she said river, I think Calvin, that's and I love all of them. I really feel like each of the stories has its own sense of not only learning, because they're not preachy, it's not about the lesson only, but sort of just this pure entertainment that happens to have this underlying theme where you come away with something that, I don't know, there's something wistful in the stories, something that makes you pensive, that makes you sort of remember it even after you've finished. And river, for some reason, the imagery, Jordan really said it best. When you turn the stream into a character and you're looking at it differently than you ever have before. And I think for me, I lost my mom, a few years back, which was a very traumatic experience for me. And so where I don't want to go into too much detail, maybe, most people haven't read the story yet, but the stream separates, it splits in directions, and it's this generational, the mother and the child. Anyway, very moving to me, and I think will be to a lot of people.
Gotcha. Thank you. What would be your advice you give to aspiring authors?
I mean, that's what I do. I give advice to aspiring authors sort of as a profession. So this is one that I could go on about for quite some time. But in short, just try to do your homework. One of the reasons I think Calvin is so efficient and is seeing success even early on as this book is launching is because of the background in music, because of all the lessons that you learned over the years where you knew what you wanted to do differently this time. And I think the biggest thing that you've changed is preparation.
Right. Yeah.
So that's, I believe, in working with authors all day, every day, at every stage of the process, the biggest regret that I hear is I wish I had known. I wish I had known. I wish I had known. A lot of people are very enamored by the idea of creating something, writing a story that have characters, segments of dialogue that are sort of burning to get out. And that's all wonderful. That's the passion, the creative side. But publishing is a business. It's an industry. Right. And if you want to build and use a bridge between your thoughts and actually reaching readers and seeing any potential for commercial success, you want to learn the marketplace, learn the nuts and bolts. Like Jordan said earlier, it's very different to learn, hear about something, read about something, and actually doing it. It's a lot of work. There are many, many steps to the process. Some of those steps have to be repeated several times. So biggest advice for new authors is, join a couple of associations, join writer groups where you can network with peers. So it's not costing you money, but you can sort of learn the lay of the land, and be patient. Be patient with yourself. Take your time so that when you're really at the point of launching a book, you feel confident and proud of what you've done, and you're ready to share it without any reservations.
Gotcha. Okay. What is the hardest lesson you've learned being an editor and a marketing advisor?
Probably the same as any marketing in any industry with any kind of product. I've been a marketer for quite a long time, not always in books. And what I love about marketing is that it is unpredictable. So based on even what I said a moment ago, we can prepare, we can do our homework, we can do all the research, define our target audience, craft the product that we feel people are most likely to embrace. We do all we can to line up all the stars. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of prayer involved. We can't control consumer behavior. We try. So that's why the word influencer is so powerful these days. we want to influence them to be curious, to want more. And so the biggest, it's just very difficult when you can't promise results, when you can't say, if you do this, you will achieve this. It doesn't work that way in art, not in books, not in music, not in movies. People can spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a movie and years of hundreds of people working, and it just may not make it. So that's the fun of it. That's the challenge of it. That's the vulnerability. And that's what makes it special. There is no set formula for success. You kind of just do the best you can and put it out there.
Gotcha. And what's probably the biggest lesson you learned working with me?
You know that. That there is no stopping Calvin James.
Yeah.
That's what I learned. Oh, terrible. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of you, Calvin.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry. How embarrassing.
It's okay.
For anyone who really wants something, even if you don't know yet, and you haven't prepared yet, and you haven't done the homework, and you may be approaching it from the outside, learn it. If you want it, learn it. Take the time, set up what you need, network, meet people, teach yourself, build a team. Calvin is proof that anything is possible. That's what I've learned. And it sounds, easy when people say it who are distant, but when you witness it up close, it's kind of remarkable.
Thank you, Beth. What's the 5 questions you've got for me?
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry I bawled on your program.
No, that's totally.
That was the risk you took inviting me because I'm an emotional basket case. Okay. What made you realize that you wanted to expand beyond music to writing stories?
I had been writing music since I'd been 19 years old. And I've been through a lot of struggles with it. Making the record company, working with Chris, and just constantly just writing. Like I trained myself to wake up in my sleep, to hear music and get up and record it. One of the songs on the first album called Joviana. Like I heard the melody and the lyrics like in my head at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I jumped up and I just recorded it and I was like, I don't know if that's any good. I went back to sleep and woke up the next morning like, oh wow, that was a good song. But once I got really, really good at it, it wasn't as enjoyable to write the music anymore. And I got so efficient because when you write, it's a numbers game. And even with the children's books, I've written 9 good children's books, but I've written like 30 other stories that are like, okay. And so with music, when I first started out, it would take me like 20 songs to write one good one. And then I got better and it took 15. And then I got better and it took 10. And when I got to my peak, there was a point where I could write 3, 4, maybe 5 solid tunes in a row. And when I got to that point, I'm like, man, I want something more challenging. And I'd always liked movies and stuff. And I realized that like telling a story is probably one of the most challenging creative processes you can do. Because in a film, you can use special effects. You can trick the audience with to cover up the plot holes. With songs, you can do every best part twice, get away with it. In a story, like it's almost like you're x-raying the author.
There's no hiding.
Yeah, there's no hiding. And so I really wanted the challenge of like I want to see if I can crack that process. And so that's what when I decided, I want to get to crack at this. And I bought Robert McKee's book, Story, and I've read that 1,000 times. And so the principles of storytelling are like ingrained in my soul. So anytime I start writing, like those principles are in my head. And so I know I'm going to write something that's going to be solid.
Very interesting. So even just a part B to that question, have you found that those things that you read and learned that have influenced you as a storyteller will now go back and influence you as a musician as well?
Oh yeah. Like I'm starting to get the passion back, so to speak. Like I said, I tried so hard for so long. It really just kind of like I beat myself up there, and I think I needed to step away from music to kind of get my passion back. And so I'm definitely taking some of those things with me. And one of the biggest things I've learned is to not paint yourself into a corner. And so something I'll do now when I write, I'm like, all right, I want to write a song in a key I've never written before, just to see what happens. you know, or like, all right, I'm going to write a song where I start with the chorus, because that's way harder to do than like building up to it. So I try to give myself little principles to follow and see what I come up with differently, to challenge myself.
The truest sense of an artist and a creator. So nature, next question. Nature is a clear thread in your writing. The elements that, you know, become characters, and the wildlife. What does nature mean to you? What made you decide that that was going to be a grounding thread throughout all the stories?
I just truly believe that all life is one, and we need to do a better job of not just taking care of our environment, but each other.
Mm.
And when writing the kids' stories, you know, I was trying to think of a way to introduce characters in a different way. You know, I've listened to a lot of books on tape and read a lot of children's books with my son. And most of them don't take the approach that my stories take, of like giving like a detailed backstory and giving the characters depth, like almost like you would in a novel. And so that's what I try to do, to just kind of like give the story more weight. So when you finish reading it, like it leaves you with something that you might want to go back and read it again. So that's what I try to do. That's why I try to bring nature into the picture, because like I truly believe, you know, we're all in this together. You know, the sooner we figure that out, the better we'll be.
Very cool. Something I also find appealing about it is that when you're creating other worlds, or, you know, characters that talk, or, you know, things that can be leaning toward the fantasy element when it's a children's book, especially, there's something about nature and wildlife that's familiar, that's universal, that we're all, you know, that we all see, that we're aware of. So I think there's something comforting in that also, in communicating new thoughts and ideas.
Right.
So how did becoming a father influence, you spoke about this a little bit, and I know that Asher has been sort of a muse and inspiration for the stories, but how do you think, for your own self, not only for Asher's sake, but as a father, as a parent, how has that influenced how you know, what you want to write about?
I just want to write stories, not just for him, but for all kids, that teach them something important about life. So when I had him, and when you have a child, you look at life in a totally different way. You know, my wife and I had a house, and then we had a kid, and the house was a hazard. Like, oh my goodness, like all these things you can get into, everything changes. And so I've been writing before he was born, but when he came into the picture, it totally shifted how I was writing. And so I went from, because I was working on novels before he was born, and then I realized, like, how can I take 60,000 words and turn it into 1,000 and still have the same weight? And I think that's actually more difficult. I think it's more difficult to say a profound message with less words than more. So it really made me like condense my ideas and like squeeze the essence out of what I was trying to write, so that I can say what might take hours to say in maybe 30 minutes of reading. That's how it changed. I said, if I'm going to write kids' books, I got to find a way to keep them engaged, but also still get the message across.
And that's one of the reasons I think your books are not only for children. I think that even with adults, our attention spans are just as short, because we just have so many things going on every day. And if you have to read something to your kid, at least it should be something that's interesting and saying something. And anyway, I'm a fan, in case anyone hasn't guessed. Okay, so how do you, this is truly a question that I always want to ask you. How do you manage, so aside from the discipline for each of the things that you're doing in your life, time management, literally just getting the most out of the 24 hours each day. When I think of the day job and your family and your home and writing and music and your health, you know, the discipline, exercise, and self-care means so much to you. How do you manage all of that in terms of, like you said, tips for other people getting started who may want to do a bunch of different things? There he is. Hi, cutie. So that's my question. Time management. How do you do that?
So the first thing I do every day is I get up about 4:30. 3 of those days I go to the gym. The other 2 of those days I'm up at 4:30 to work on the novels that I'm writing, other children's stories, and music ideas. So, hey, you gotta be quiet. You gotta be quiet. So I get up as early as possible to get the most out of the day. And literally, like every waking moment, I'm thinking of story ideas. I heard a recent quote from a director where I found very interesting, where how I said earlier, it's a numbers game. You know, like you have to write a lot and think a lot about stories to write good stories. And this director was working with his actor, and this actor had this idea, and he kept pushing it to the director, like, "Hey, we got to do this, we got to do this." And the assistant director knew it was a bad idea, but he wouldn't say anything in front of the actor. And so, you know, the actor left, and the assistant director said to the director, like, "Why does that guy keep pushing that bad idea?" And he said, "Because you and I think of 1,000 ideas in a day. He thinks of one every 6 months." So he thinks that's a good idea.
He's stuck on that one.
Right. So what I have to do is like constantly, it has to be constant. You kind of like never get a day off. So like while I'm at work, if I have downtime with patients, you know, I'm working on the story. I'm pacing out ideas. I'm looking at the emotional beats of the novel that I'm editing right now, which is The White, which will be out in October 2023. And I make sure when I come home from work, the first thing I'm doing is spending time with my wife and Asher. The home has to be the sanctuary. You can't let stuff intrude on that, because just as much as you need to work, you also need downtime.
Boundaries, yeah, absolutely.
Because if you don't have that, you will get burned out. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I learned with music. Like I had no downtime. I literally, like if people hadn't heard the story of the freezer, like I took a job making $8.50 an hour, doing an internship from 9 to 5, working in a newsroom making $8.50 an hour from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. and slept in a storefront because I didn't have any money. In the winter of 2010, I just literally like burned myself to the bone and did not give myself that rest. So you just have to plan and prioritize, and that's probably why I've had success in this first book. I planned it out years in advance, and like Chris said, I had a fixed plan, but it was pliable. It wasn't like, all right, I'm doing it this way. If it doesn't work out this way, well, I'm going to do something else. I'm like, all right, the road might narrow, it might get wider, but I know where I'm going. And so that's the key. You have to plan it out.
And we've had that conversation lots of times, that having a plan and really thinking it through, not broad strokes, but actually details, doesn't have to mean it's in stone. So you can plan as much as you want so that you're ready and you're prepared, but it doesn't mean that it can't be flexible, that you can move or shift the timeline or decide that this priority has become more important. You know, number 7 on the list has become number 2. That stuff is all possible, but it's so much easier than starting with a blank page every day. So
yes. Yeah, I have this saying that what works in your head doesn't always work on paper. What works on paper won't always work in a novel. What works in a novel won't always work in a script. What works on a script won't always work in a film. And sometimes the best things happen by accident. So you have to be open. Like you can't be so rigid that you don't see the good idea that's waiting in the wings because you have tunnel vision. So it's important to plan, but you got to be able to roll with the punches as well.
Absolutely. And last one is, I had to think about this because you are such a prolific creator. I was thinking, should I ask, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Should I ask about 5 years? But you do have a timeline for these books, flexible as it may be. And so my curiosity is, think 10 years. Where do you see yourself in 10 years, when a lot of this stuff will be in fruition?
So there is a series of novels that I'm working on. One is finished that I'm working on right now. That's called The White. The next one's called Black Code. But they're kind of loosely connected, and there's about 5 of those books, and all of them have like a good starting point in my head. So by 2030, I would like to have at least 3 of those done. I'm being conservative because I don't know what the time will be like. I still have to write the step outlines for the next book, which is The Black Code. But that's where I see myself and there's another story I've written like right after the last children's books called City. And that's more like a short story. That's almost like 30,000 words. And I haven't sent that one to you yet, but I don't know if I like it. Like it's a fun story but it's a much bigger story. It's more like a young adult story. Okay. And so I see myself moving away from the children's book genre because my ideas are getting bigger and I want to tell more interesting stories. So by 2030, I probably will have shifted to writing novels.
Plus, by that point, Asher will be 13, 14. And so your number one fan, your audience is growing. You want to grow with them. That makes sense. That's all I've got.
All right. Well, for everybody who joined this live stream, thank you so much. You know, it was so greatly appreciated. You know, like I said, the response to the Color Water Fountain has been amazing. And I'm so appreciative of everyone who bought the book, talked about the book, shared it with family. And for everyone else out there, like I have this saying to myself that once you decide who you want to be and where you want to go in life, the only obstacles you have to go through are the ones you put in front of yourself. Don't let anything stop you from doing what you want to do. So Jordan, thank you. Chris, thank you. Beth, thank you. For everyone who joined the live stream, thank you so much for joining us. Say good night, buddy.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
See you, Asher.
All right. Beth, that's Beth right there. That's the marketing advisor. So I talk to her in the mornings.
Hi.
All right. Thank you very much. And good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Love you, buddy.
Yeah. Love you too, man. Take care.
Take care.
Say bye to Uncle
Bye.
Chris.
Bye.